Hello and welcome to our 1.21 modded Vanilla Plus Let's Play series. In this series, I'll be walking you through my thought process as I build villages like these. We spawned in a savanna biome, and in true Minecraftian tradition, I started by punching a tree. That was then used to make a wooden pickaxe, but I quickly found and mined out some stone for better tools. The mod pack I'm playing is something I've strung together for this series, so there's going to be a lot of things that we'll be discovering together. I journeyed through sunset, eventually coming across a campfire that was definitely not friendly. Not wanting to chance combat at this point, I dug my way into the ground and spent the night mining, where I came across a lot of copper ore. Useless copper ore. Would be a shame if I just... And now we have a copper pickaxe. I did find a few pieces of iron, which were used to craft a shield and a bucket. Before I start any major project, I do get together a build palette, and for this one, we needed black dye. So I may or may not have visited some squid. Hey, look, a bridge! Ever since I was a kid, I've just loved bridges. I always imagined them as being portals into some sort of fey realm. Alright, anyways, back on task, I knew I wanted a lot of spruce and dark oak wood for the build, so I needed to find a place that would offer easy access to both. As I trekked through an old-growth spruce forest, I eventually stumbled into a meadow, a perfect clearing that would offer everything I wanted for this village. Across the river was a stony shore, another perfect flat plain for a build, and a small Minecraft village. The loot wasn't anything special, but the most valuable resource here would be the villagers themselves. Up the hill sat an ancient ruin filled with interesting bits and baubles. One chest had gold and emeralds, and between a few others were candles, feathers, paper, and some crops. The chests and barrels were commandeered to accommodate the ever-growing storage need. These books would be super helpful in making a lectern later, but the ink sacs were making me feel kind of guilty for killing all those squid. Moving right along, nestled amongst the other ruined structures, was a half-formed nether portal and 2 obsidians sitting in its chest. There were 9 more obsidian in a chest inside the village, which meant a complete portal, episode 1. I didn't have any flint or iron at the time, so back at base I got to work covering a lava pit. I definitely wanted to make use of this somehow, maybe in a smithy build, but if I didn't create a platform on top, I would most definitely fall in. The next day or so was spent popping trees to gather wood and clear some space. Timber is a data pack that lets you chop 1 block and fell the whole tree. It's a huge time saver, but it also eats axes like crazy. You can also configure it to take health, only chop certain types of trees, or whether or not it destroys the leaves as well. I tend to turn that off since they make a god-awful noise when they're all broken at once. The next day had a bit of light exploring, but I soon came across gravel and dug it out until I had some flint. On my way to the portal, I noticed an opportunity I couldn't resist. This mine shaft dungeon was genuinely so fun to explore. There were lots of juicy ore veins and all kinds of areas filled with secrets. Once I had my fill of mining, I went back to the surface and ventured into the nether. And we're back. On my last Let's Play, someone mentioned I should keep the biome I got a secret until I actually needed to go there, so you'll all have to wait. It was a doozy though. Back out on the road, the search began for a cow. The highest level of the village was covered in dense snow, so leather boots were needed to keep me safe. Aw, boars. I wonder if they're hostile. My search took me far across the plains, eventually running into an old rotten shack. And mound house. I came across a pillager outpost and decided to take my chance at their loot chest. Allays weren't something I was overly excited about upon their introduction, but I did free the little guys anyways. As I made my supposed escape, I began to wonder why I still heard pillager noises. Turns out someone was a little mad I killed his captain. The man was in a boat. I didn't know they could even get in boats. That scare aside, as I boated into the sunrise with my allays trailing behind me and this little dolphin that decided to follow us, I was very much loving the fairy princess vibes. Now remember, this whole part of the quest was about finding a cow to gather leather, and I had to go a ridiculous distance just to find one. So why, the only one I found in a 1,000-block radius had a baby? I can only conclude this universe hated me. I used the milk to get rid of the villager raid effect, while debating my own morality. There was another pillager camp nearby, so I took my chances at more treasure. Off the coast, I spotted a couple of ships, curious if they were friendlies. They were very much not friendlies. As I rowed for my life, I also came across a shipwreck. I'm not sure why this world decided to bless me with every kind of treasure other than the 2 pieces of leather I needed, but I took it all the same. Night came faster than I was prepared for, but just before I dug myself into a hole, I came across a safe haven. I took the chance to rest for the night, but the next morning discovered something terrible. More pillagers, this time with prisoners. But I was a seasoned combatant now and took out the bowmen with ease. There was one left, weaponless and unassuming. Perhaps drunken on overconfidence, I ignored him and ran straight for the loot. The man one-shotted me. I didn't even know that was possible, and I dropped my head? It does something to a person, seeing their own head. Leatherless, I still found myself, and of course, the next bovine I came across was a moo bloom. I mean, how could I? We were twinning. It was at that point that I remembered, cows aren't the only thing that dropped leather. Want to see a magic trick? Yay, new boots! I snagged a few cherry trees while I was here so I could plant some back home. Where upon my arrival, I got to work clearing space for a build. I then carved out a pathway to make it easy to get up and down the mountain. When making staircases, you generally have two options. You can use stairs or slabs. I prefer the look and feel of slabs most of the time, which means each step needs to be at least 2 blocks deep. I also got to work on what would eventually become the main path into and around the village. I start with paths because it makes it easy for villages to have a sense of flow, and to work around the natural terrain. There are 2 schools of thought when pathing. Give it lots of interesting twists and turns, which is aesthetically pleasing, or keep it pretty straight, which might look boring, but it's much easier to use. I tend to go with the first option, but it can be a nightmare in a survival playthrough, so this time I'm going to keep them kind of tidy. Pathways generally should be about the same width. I tend to start with 2 blocks, but I will probably widen this to 3 later on. I also plan to mix in a lot of coarse dirt, just to break up the dirt paths a bit. After I was satisfied with the section of the path I was working on, I started to think about where I wanted the buildings. More specifically, on what levels. By putting your builds on different levels, you'll give the village varying heights, which creates a lot more visual interest. Once I've gotten some decent work done, I like to take a step back and see if I'm happy. In creative, this would mean flying above the build, but in survival, we're going to use the map. The path was looking good. I like the curve that it has as we get further in, but the entry is a little too straight, so I may change that up later. I might have it flow around this hill here, but at this point I'm not too sure. I think about what would matter most for a group of people to do as they live their lives here. Where would they walk most? What paths would they take? How would they lay out their buildings? This will all vary by the type of settlement. In this case, I'm imagining a group of plant lovers who spend most of their time caring for the natural and magical worlds around them. To support this, the largest and most central builds will be a greenhouse and a library with mushroomy themes. Signs are a great tool when planning out your village. Having a physical representation of an idea makes it much more likely that that idea will be created. And in this case, it helps me know what types of buildings I need to plan for. Going back to the pathways, they don't just have to cross over things, they can also go through areas. I'm a huge fan of tunnels and bridges, so I try to incorporate at least one whenever I can. As with pathways, your tunnels don't have to be perfectly straight, but keep in mind that visually interesting turns means more for you to dodge around. And all of these tips are just that. Tips. I tend to go a bit buck nutty when it comes to my pathing and just randomly shoveling grass until I get a shape I'm happy with. This time, I'm taking them a bit more seriously. The next area that needed some work was the cliff face headed towards the other village. I originally tried slabs for this, but stairs made a lot more sense for this situation. And like so, the main paths were complete. The terrain itself was my next focus. Generally speaking, I wanted to work with what was there, but I needed another large space for a few builds, so I got to work filling in this dip here. I did this as a single layer, allowing the option for an easy basement or subfloor if I decided to go that route. I've linked a tutorial by Blue Nerd Minecraft in the description for a more in-depth view on how to shape terrain for your builds. I ran out of dirt pretty quickly, but instead of mining a random area for more, I worked on clearing out a space that I would need for the greenhouse. This helped me work towards both tasks at the same time. A great benefit of taking breaks between each task is working on something else might give you more insight into what you were doing before. In this case, I realized I had a tendency to jump off the hill here, which made it the perfect place for another path. I think about the concept of elephant paths a lot while building. We might plan everything down to a T, designing the most aesthetically pleasing or functionally sensible routes possible, but if they don't satisfy your own needs when building, people would probably carve out their own walkways anyway. With that done, I got to work sketching out a few building layouts. These don't have to be perfect or even really used in the end, but it's another way to get a visual of what space your current plan might leave feeling empty or unfinished. In my case, I wanted the entryway to feel like a cozy, close-knit community of workers that just hint at the magical buildings to come as you travel further along the path. My plan was for this area to be private property or just one large farmhouse, but it felt like an awkward stop off for the main path. So instead, I brought it along the edges and gave it 2 optional directions, a connection to the upper part of the village and a mine shaft. The next morning, I had the idea of moving the ruined castle, which would have been originally sat on top of the mineshaft, to the stony shore as a cover for a couple auto farms. These farms can be loud, so I didn't want them in our actual village, and this would provide the perfect cover. And that was what we accomplished in this episode. I'm absolutely loving the terrain of this meadow. I think the levels have some beautiful heights to them, and I can't wait to see it with the builds in. Next episode, we're going to set up a lot of the automations we need to make building a smooth and cozy process. It is my goal to hit 100,000 subscribers this year, so please subscribe if you haven't, and don't forget to like the video. Also, I launched merch, which includes these super cute stickers that I make, package, and ship myself, as well as some very cozy apparel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.